Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are currently in chapter 26, and one of the, as I said before, there's not a lot of time devoted to Isaac's life itself, unlike Abraham and Jacob. So this is one of the few chapters we're going to just see, kind of an insight into Isaac's life. He's probably somewhere in around the neighborhood of 80 to 100 right now. The children are grown, but like I say, not a lot. He's the promised son. That's basically all we kind of need to know. All right, here we go. There was another famine in the land in addition to the one that had occurred in Abraham's time. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, at Gerar. The Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land I tell you about. Stay in this land as a foreigner, and I will be with you and bless you. For I will give all these lands to you and your offsprings, and I will confirm the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky, and I will give your offsprings all these lands, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offsprings, because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my mandate, my commandments, my statutes, my instructions." So Isaac settled in Gerar. Now, there's a couple of things about this that I think is worth pointing out. One, sometimes we hear preachers, telling people, and it's kind of misleading in the sense of kind of an open-ended blessing, and that if you kind of, create your own kind of prayer and all that kind of stuff, that God would just kind of follow suit with that. And they use like Isaac and things like that. But let me just say this. Isaac was blessed. Abraham was blessed because they followed God's command. In other words, God blessed them in this land here because this is where God told them to stay. So be careful about in terms of crafting prayers and stuff. In other words, our prayers are going to be answered according to God's will for our life. So I can't pray, Lord, Lord, make me, chairman of Tesla or chairman of Amazon, right? Yeah, I just picked the two richest men in the world, because people have the idea that, well, if you just believe it, it can happen. No, it can't happen. It certainly can't happen if God hasn't decreed for you to happen. Now, that's not to say that you can't pray for things. However, what I'm simply saying is that, when you look at these kinds of verses here, remember the blessing was because God was with Abraham and now Isaac, where God directed them. And we're going to see this. I'll bring this up again. You remember, a lot of people, I've even seen churches march around their whatever church buildings, whatever, using, when the children of Israel marched around, Jericho, and the walls came down, and people kind of used that, well, let's march around and God's going to answer our prayers. No, he's not. That's not what he's doing. Because if you notice, Israel did not march around Egypt. In other words, the blessing was where God's plan was for them. And so we I don't know, we like to get off into that. And no. Another thing about this is that here we see God reaffirming the covenant with Isaac. Now remember, as far as the land is concerned, Isaac and them will not live in this land as the Israelites will. This will not be for another like 400 years. Closer to 500 years from now that they will actually live in the land, and yet we see the promise of this. But God is telling them, you're going to be a blessing, and he's telling them to stay in this land, And then one other thing we see this is that the blessings of Abraham, in other words, the blessings of Isaac, was because of the blessings of Abraham. And when we talk about right standing with God, our right standing with God is not based upon what we do. I want you to understand that when we look at God's telling Isaac, you're blessed because Abraham was my guy. The same thing, we are blessed because Jesus, the righteousness of Jesus. All right, so, but that's, to me, tremendous to understand as far as righteousness is concerned. All right, so let's move on. Verse 7, when the men of that place, did I finish what I want here? Oh, well, let me go back and read this statement here. Verse 6, so Isaac settled in Gerar, and when the men of that place asked about his wife, he said, she is my sister, for he was afraid to say, my wife, thinking the men of that place will kill me on the account of Rebekah, for she is a beautiful woman. Now, that's kind of interesting here that I don't know where Isaac learned this from, but the old adage that apples don't fall too far from the tree, like father, like son. Remember, Abraham did this with Sarah twice, and oddly, with the same people, Abimelech. Now, Abimelech, like the term Abimelech was a kind of a leadership term, like the term Pharaoh, right? So a different generation now, and so you would different people, but they probably certainly would have known who Abraham was. He was well known around the land. So it's just kind of interesting that he, again, God had just told him, I'm going to be with you and bless you, and yet here when the men ask, they go, oh, she's my sister, because it also kind of shows you the sinful nature of people at the time, that if you were weaker, you got stomped, right? You got abused. And if you were stronger, you could take whatever you want. In a sense, that's what they were doing. But Isaac had God on his side. And if you remember, even with Abimelech, when he took Abraham's wife, God came to him and said, you're a dead man. And he was like, whoa, God, hold on, wait a minute now, wait a minute here, wait, what? And so, but it's just kind of, men, our weaknesses sometimes here. Verse 8, when Isaac had been there for some time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from his window and was surprised to see Isaac caressing his wife, Rebekah. And Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, so she's really your wife, right? Dude, either there's some freaky stuff going on here, she's your wife. How can you say she's my sister? Isaac answered, because I thought I might die on account of her. And again, this is to me sort of a weakness of Isaac, since God had already told him, I'm going to be with you. Verse 10, and Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people could have easily slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech warned all the people with these words, whoever harms this man's wife will certainly die. So it seems here that the people knew who Abraham was and who the God of Abraham was. We're going to see this later on with even the children of Israel themselves. That it's almost like they're going to have more faith, in God than the people of God themselves. Notice this, and Abimelech would tell all the people. Now he could have heard this from his father or grandfather of what happened when Abraham came, and Abraham said the same thing and lied and said Sarah was his sister, and then all of a sudden God came to him, and remember, God even kind of closed up the wombs of some of the people. And this story could have been passed on, and he's telling people, don't mess with this man. This man's God is, like I say, it's kind of sad that Isaac didn't believe. All right. So, verse 12, Isaac sowed seed in the land, and in that year he reaped 100 times what was sown. The Lord blessed him. And the man became rich and kept getting richer until he was very wealthy. He had flocks of sheep, herds, cattle, and many slaves. And the Philistines were envious of him. So, when you're in a famine and everyone else is not prospering. Verse 15, the Philistines stopped up all of the wells that his father's slaves had dug in the days of his father Abraham, filling them with dirt. And then Abimelech said to Isaac, "Leave us, for you are too powerful for us." So Isaac left there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and lived there. Isaac reopened the water well that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, and that the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died. He gave them the same names his father had given them. Then Isaac's slaves dug in the valley and found a well of spring water there. But the herdmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdmen and said, "The water is ours." So he named the well Quarrel, because they quarreled with them. Then they dug another well and quarreled over that one, so he named it Hostility. He moved on from there and dug another, and they did not quarrel over that, and he named it Open Spaces, for he said, "Now the Lord has made room for us, and we will be fruitful in the land." And from there he went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him that night and said, "I am the God of your fathers Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply you, your offsprings, because of my servant Abraham." So, again, God is reaffirming the covenant. He should believe it. So he built an altar there and called on the name of Yahweh and pitched his tent there. And Isaac's slaves also dug a well there. Now, this is a kind of interesting story here. Look at this one. Now, Abimelech came to him in Gershon with Ashuzat, his advisors, and Phicol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to him, "Why have you come to me? You hated me and sent me away from you," right? Yeah, we did, right? They replied, "We clearly see how the Lord has been with you." Now, again, when they say Lord, it's unclear, and I'm going to tell you why I don't think it's unclear that they actually mean the God of Abraham. Now, and if they are saying that, in other words, paganism was rampant, was pretty much the standard there. Everybody was in some kind of pagan worship. And so basically what they could have been arguing or acknowledging is that, well, we worship these gods over here, but your God is really coming through for you. Okay? Now again, we'll say that. Now let me tell you why I say that more than Yahweh is the Lord, creator of the universe. And this is why. They're not submitting to him. That's my point. In other words, they're not. We want to submit to this Lord. In other words, we're going to forsake all of our gods and we're going to submit to Yahweh. They're not doing that. All right. So anyway, verse 28 again. They replied, "We have clearly seen how the Lord has been with you. We think there should be an oath between two parties. Between us and you, let us make a covenant with you. You will not harm us, just as we have not harmed you, but only have done what is good to you, sending you away in peace. You are now blessed by the Lord." So he prepared a banquet for them, and they ate and drank. They got up early in the morning and swore an oath to each other. Then Isaac sent them on their way, and they left him in peace. And on the same day, Isaac's slaves came to him to tell him about the well they have dug, saying, "We have found water." And he called it Sheba. And therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. And they got up early in the morning and swore an oath to each other. Oh, I'm sorry. And they saw named Beersheba to this day. Verse 34. When Isaac was 40 years old, so that this would make Abraham about 100, right? He was 60 when Isaac was born, so he's about 100 years old now. When Isaac was 40 years old, he took a wife named Judith, daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite. They made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah, which is why God did not want, especially Isaac, taking a wife. Now, this would also be true for Jacob. So we come back to Esau. And as I said, Esau, remember at the very birth, God said that the older would serve the younger. But the purpose of that, well, I'm not telling you the purpose of it. One of the purposes that God's choosing. And the reason why I'm careful about ascribing characteristics. No one, the Bible doesn't expressly say that the reason why he chose Jacob over Esau is because of Esau's bad character. So I want to be careful not to say that. I think the greater reason God chose Jacob over Esau is because God's decree. That's plain and simple. And because even later on we see Esau gets better in life. Just like, as I said before, all of the 12 tribes, or most of the 12 tribes, I take that back, except Joseph, were scoundrels. But they outgrew that to a point. So character has nothing to do with it, I guess, and that's my point. Character has nothing to do with it. It was just simply God's decree. But Esau definitely shows himself of the worst. Now remember, at this time too, Jacob is a scoundrel. Remember, he cheats his brother, and we're going to see in the next chapter he's even worse. He's going to cheat his brother out of his, cheat out of his birthright, and he cheats him by stealing it. When if he was following God, he could have realized God is going to give it to me anyway. But these wives here kind of shows, and they was just, you almost get the feeling that they were hood rats, ghetto, hillbillies, right? I mean, we could just go down the road to say that they just, just crude people, and just, loud. Anyway, but you see, and Esau's going to realize this later on, that, okay, maybe these are not the best gals I chose. All right, guys, look, I'll see you in the next study. All right.